欢迎大家参加商务部例行新闻发布会。今天我没有需要。
On the 1st of June, President Xi Jinping and President Putin have met in Moscow. Both parties have exchanged views and reached consensus concerning economic and trade cooperation. It has laid a solid foundation for the new era economic trade development, and this has laid a solid foundation and opened up a broad prospect for new cooperation. And during the meeting, the two presidents have signed a series of documents with a series of results. At the departmental level, in trade, MOFCOM and the Ministry of Economic Development of Russian Federation have signed a MOU concerning upgrading the high-quality growth of bilateral trade. And the bilateral trade will be targeted to be $200 billion. And we will also cooperate in implementing major products, and we will negotiate for economic trade institutional arrangements, nurture new engines, expand trading entities, and improve on the safeguarding and securing mechanisms. And in agriculture, MOFCOM, Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Area, have signed the agreement with the Russian counterparts, an agreement concerning enhancing the soybean cooperation between both countries. And this has laid a solid foundation for the soybean trade and the food industry chain cooperation. Related departments and ministries have signed the wheat quarantine requirement agreement and other four agreements concerning the market access of agricultural goods. And this has laid a solid foundation for the high-speed growth of agricultural product trade. And in technological innovation, both parties have signed documents to establish the joint foundation of scientific innovation, and this will offer strong support for the cooperation in the scientific aspect. And for enterprises and companies, we have signed agreements concerning nuclear power, natural gas, chemical industry, high-tech park, joint ventures of e-commerce, and the cooperation in the weaponry aspect. We have signed 11 aspects of agreement with the volume of more than $20 billion, and this will lift bilateral trade and industrial cooperation. And for the documents, the cooperation have covered not only traditional energy resources sector, and in high-tech sector, medical care, e-commerce, and other emerging sectors, both countries have made progress, and we have accelerated this progress. It shows that China and Russia have great potential in terms of the cooperation, and we also have great opportunities. Overall, this China-Russia presidents meeting have a rich result, and this lay a foundation and point a direction for the new era of cooperation. And this also injects new vitality and boosts the confidence of the business cycle. And this nurtures new engine of practical cooperation between both countries. Thank you. From Phoenix, we see that China has released the white paper explaining China's position on China-U.S. economic trade consultations. After the white paper, the U.S. has shown no sign of making compromise, but the U.S. has taken a strong position against this backdrop. What is China's barriers to make breakthrough in this deadlock? On last weekend, the white paper has outlined the whole process of the economic trade consultations and the basic situations. China has stated its positions and principles concerning these consultations. We hope that the U.S. can take these white papers seriously and figure out the logics and facts concerning basic issues. We hope that the U.S. can take a correct attitude and rectify wrong behaviors to offer necessary conditions and environments for tackle the difficulties.
谢谢发言人。新华社记者提问：我们注意到近日美国副
Thank
总
you.
统彭斯
From
表示，
Xinhua News
特朗普认
Agency,
为美方在
we
贸
see
易
that
谈判中
Vice
处于有利
President
地位。
Pence
美
of the
国
U.S.
对中国
has
输美商品加
expressed
征关税
that
还可以
the
加倍
U.S.
甚至更多。
is
请问
at
您对
an
此如何评
advantageous
论？
position
另外
in
呢，
the
外媒
consultation,
也有外
and the
媒评论
tariffs
说，
can
中
be
方近
added
期
for
打出了
several
一
more
系列
times.
反
What
制
is
的
your
组合
comment?
拳。
And it is also
认为这
reported that
是意味着中
China
方
has
不惜
taken
妥
a
协，未
series
来
of
还有可能会出
countermeasures,
台更多的
and
反制的
the
武器。请问您对此如
foreign
何回应？谢谢。
media thinks this means China will not compromise and will roll out more countermeasures. What is your response? Thank you. Economics, theory, and historical experience have shown that there are no winners for a trade war. And the study of certain think tank of the U.S. shows that if with continuous tariff hikes, the GDP growth of the U.S. will slip down, and there will be less investment and jobs, and the domestic price of the U.S. will hike, and the U.S. goods will be less competitive overseas. More and more U.S. enterprises and consumers are feeling the influence of this tariff hike, and more recessional warnings has been issued concerning the trade war. And second, for tariff hikes and the threat of escalation of trade friction, these kind of practices are of no benefits to tackling the difficulties. If resorting to the so-called advantageous position and ignoring China's sovereignty and core interests, if the purpose is to force China to bow, and this will lead to nowhere. At last, I want to say that China does not want a trade war, but we are not afraid of one. If the U.S. sticks to its way of escalation, we will take necessary countermeasures, and we will resolutely safeguard the interests of our nation and the people.
谢谢发言人，我是 CNBC 的记者，然后我有
From CNBC.
第一个就是请问不可
I have
靠
the following questions. First,
牵涉到是什么样的公司
for the
和
unreliable entities list,
有什么相
what
关
are
的
the
方面或
enterprises
是不相关的地方？然后第二
related
个问题
to
就
this
是
list?
请问中美贸易谈判有何进展
And？second,
目前是否
for
认为
the
两国在
consultations,
贸易方
what
面
are
走得
the
越来越
current
远？
progress? Can
第
we
三就是请问
think
大
that
豆
both countries
猪肉
have
系统
diverged
和
even further in trade?
或者什么其他的
Third,
领域，因
for
为
the
中美贸易摩
soybean,
擦，
pork
商务
or
部
rare
有
earth,
注意到进
what
出
are
口
the
明显的
areas
变化。
influenced by the
最
escalation
后就
of
是
the
中
trade
方
war?
在反应措施里准备加
At
关
last,
税，还有使用其他措施。
And
谢
for
谢。
the
谢谢你的这些提问。
in addition
关于你
to
提到的第
additional
一个
tariff,
问
what are
题，
China's
目
measures
前
to counter?
中国政
And
府
for your first
正在
question,
履行必要的程序，
Chinese
具体的
government
措施
is
将于近期。
taking necessary procedural measures,
至于和
and
负
the
面清
specific
单
measures
的
will be
不
released
同，
in
不
recent
可
days.
靠实体清
And
单
for the
规范的对象是不遵
difference
守市场规则，
between the unreliable
位于
entities
契约
list
精
and
神，
the negative list,
出
the
于
target
非
is
商业
for
目
the
的，
enterprises who go
对中国
against
企
market
业
principles
实
and
施封
entrepreneurship
锁、
spirit.
管控，
And these
严
enterprises
重损害中
will
国企业
blockade
正当
China's
权益的
enterprises
外国
for
企业、
non-commercial
组
reasons
织
and will
或者个
damage
人，
the legitimate rights
不
of the
同
Chinese
于
enterprises.
涉及
And
行
the
业
list
市
will
场主
cover
顾的
the
负面
foreign
清单。
enterprises,
当然，
organizations, or
从某种意义
individuals,
上
and
说，
this is different from
这
the
类似于
negative
涉及
list
企
of
业、
market access.
组织
And
或者
to
个
some
人的负
extent,
面清单。具体的细节我们将于近期
this
公布。
is a negative list for a specific
关于你提
enterprise,
到的第二个问
individuals
题，
and organizations.
由于美方的极限施压，
And for the second,
不断升级贸易摩擦，并将事态向其他领域扩散，致使中美经贸磋商严重受挫。责任完全在美方，解铃还需系铃人。未来的走势取决于美方，我们将听其言，观其行。关于你提到的第3个问题，我印象中是关于一些具体的商品的情况。我这里有2组数据。根据中国海关的统计，今年的1到4月份，中国进口大豆2439万吨，同比下降7.9%。其中
And the import of soybean has dropped by 7.9% year on year, and the import from the US 4.31 million tons, down by 70.6%, and from Brazil, more than 150 million tons, more than 15 million tons. And from Argentina, the increase has been about 23 times. China is the largest overseas market of US soybeans, according to the Global Trade System statistics. As influenced by the protectionism of the US soybean export to China has dropped from 62.3% to 11.9% in the total export of soybean in the US. And for the import of pork, for the first 4 months, China's import of pork about 0.774 million tons, down by 4.9%, and import from the US 70,000 tons, down by 53.6%, and from Brazil, Canada, Britain, Netherlands, the import have increased substantially with a margin higher than 10%. And China's market is open. We welcome competitive goods and products to enter into the Chinese market. And from the data above, you can see that the US trade protectionism and trade bullying are the main reason to damage the agricultural products trade. And this benefits nobody. And for China's next steps of countermeasures, I have already said that China does not want a trade war, but we are not afraid. If the US sticks to the wrong path of escalation, we will take necessary countermeasures to safeguard the interests of the nation and the people. Thank you. Thank you. From Economic Daily, MOFCOM has released a statement concerning the U.S. benefits concerning the China-U.S. trade relationship. We have just issued the white paper on China's position, and today we release this report. What is China's consideration behind this? For this afternoon, we have just released a report. Since the current administration took office, the U.S. ignored the win-win nature of China-U.S. trade cooperation. It has exclaimed that the U.S. has taken the loss, and it also uses deficit as an excuse to initiate the trade friction. And for the U.S. returns in the trade cooperation between U.S. and China, this report uses data and facts to review the nature of the trade deficit. And the report also points out that the U.S. has gained a lot for the bilateral trade between U.S. and China. And this helps us to better understand the real conditions of China-U.S. trade. The report points out that the U.S. statistics may be inflated, and these statistics cannot show the actual conditions, the U.S. deficit is a result of the artificial measures such as export restriction, and it is also the result of market operation. And this deficit is the result of the industrial competitiveness, economic structure, international distribution of labor, trade policy, and the reserve currency status of the US dollar. China has the surplus, but the profit goes to both countries. The saying that the US is taking the loss and China is taking the profit, this is totally foundless. Over the past 40 years since the establishment of diplomatic ties, we have gone a long way of commercial cooperation. And this is a result that both countries have taken the opportunity of globalization and enhancing cooperation that is mutually beneficial. If only one country takes the benefits, it is impossible that we have gone this far, and it is impossible that we have such a large scale of economic and trade cooperation. We urge the U.S. to take a rational and objective approach concerning the tangible benefits for the two peoples. And we hope that the U.S. can realize the contribution of the bilateral trade to the world economic prosperity. We hope that the U.S. can do more to enhance bilateral, mutually beneficial cooperation. Thank you. From China News Service. Also on the white paper, some people say that this white paper shows that China is willing to go for a long time for the trade war. What is your comment? Thank you for your question. As mentioned in the white paper, China-U.S. relationship is essential. The commercial relationship is the ballast and propeller of the bilateral relationship. It is influencing the fundamental interest of the two peoples, and it is also essential for the world prosperity and stability. We are dedicated to see the sound and healthy development of the bilateral commercial relationship. China does not want a trade war, but we do not fear one. If the U.S. sticks to its escalation, we will fight one. Thank you. Thank you. From Hubei television, and the U.S. President Trump has expressed before his visit to Britain that he is confident that the U.S. government can give up using Huawei equipment. What is MOFCOM's comment? We notice that the U.S. has no factual foundations and initiate and use administrative measures to suppress foreign enterprises across the globe. This is appalling. And for the U.S. to use the national forces and resort to non-commercial measures to suppress Chinese enterprises, we are staunchly opposed to that. We hope that the U.S. can remain rational to avoid further escalation. We also believe that related countries will not yield to external pressure and to respect market rules and the rule of law, and to offer a fair condition and non-discriminative environment for other enterprises. We believe that other countries will follow this path. Thank you. From CNR, President Trump has mentioned in social media that China is subsidizing its products to be further sold in the U.S. And he also mentioned that many companies have left China to go to other countries, including the U.S., to avoid paying tariffs. And the U.S. is taking billions of US dollars as a return. What is your comment? Lately, IMF has released a report that China-U.S. trade frictions have led to the decrease of bilateral trade, but the deficit has remained roughly, and due to the increase of tariff, the cost is almost entirely bared by the U.S. importers. According to latest customs data, tariff increase has the trend of decreasing, and these are expected because there are no winners for trade war. We hope that the U.S. can give up the zero-sum game mindset and give up trade bullying. We hope that the U.S. can take into the consideration of the interests for enterprises and peoples in both countries. We hope that the U.S. can consider the world prosperity and stability to better tackle the U.S.-China trade relationship. Thank you. From CI, we also want to know more on the unreliable entity list. Do we have the specific entities for this list? When will this list be released? And will we prioritize ICT in this list? And for the companies in this list, what are China's measures against these companies? Thank you. And for this list, after we finish related procedures, we will release specific details. As a regulatory institution, it does not target any individual sector. It does not target any individual company or individual. And for specific situations, we will release in the near future. Thank you. From CGTN, China has announced to establish the unreliable entity list, and this has drawn the attention of the outside world. Does this list comply with WTO rules? And does China concern that related countries may complain under the WTO framework? And for the enterprises under this list, what are the possible pathways for them to make complaint? And WTO, GATT, and other international trade agreements have also stipulated that the national security can be exceptions. And anti-monopoly laws have also stipulated that for non-commercial reasons and the refusal of non-commercial transactions and other discriminative activities, these activities are against the law and will be penalized. And for China's anti-monopoly law, we have related stipulation also. And for this list to be implemented, we will safeguard the lawful rights of enterprises. Thank you. From Caixin, for such a list to be established, what shortcomings will this list make up for in the current arrangement? Thank you. For us to release such a list, it is referring to common international practices, and the purpose is to safeguard a level playground in the market for improving the business environment and safeguarding the lawful rights of enterprises. And we are also safeguarding the market condition based on contracts. And in this respect, we have a comprehensive legal framework. But due to unilateralism and trade protectionism, the market condition and market order have experienced new eventualities and new challenges. The Chinese government will establish such a list. It will focus on the enterprises that they will distort the market for non-commercial reasons. And for the enterprises who abide by China's laws, who abide by the market principles and the contractual spirit, these enterprises need not worry at all. Thank you. From Aoya Television, we see that USTR and the U.S. Department of finance have accused China of playing the wordplay and distorting the process of consultation. What is your comment? And for the U.S. statement on the 4th of June, we have explained China's position also. And the U.S. and China have been in this consultation. The U.S. is accusing China of backpedaling, and it is totally foundless. In consultations, revising certain expressions and drafts, this is a common practice of trade consultations. And in previous more than 10 rounds of negotiation, the U.S. has continuously adjusted its demand. But it is throwing accusations of backpedaling at China, and this is unacceptable. And it is not China who is blaming others. We always think that cooperation needs to be based on principles, and consultation has bottom lines. Both countries need to respect each other's sovereignty, dignity, and core interests. If the U.S. wants to resort to maximum pressure to force China to compromise, this will not succeed. Thank you. From Reuters. Also on the unreliable entity list. Could you tell us whether the companies incorporated in the list are these companies mainly from the U.S.? And whether the enterprises will be put into the list or not, is it related to their interactions with Huawei? Another question on the list. For how long will this list stand? Are there any conditions for the list to be removed? And G20 summit will be held in the near future. What is China's plans? Will there be any negotiation with the U.S. economic trade team? Thank you for your questions. And for your first question on the unreliable entity list, I have just emphasized that it is a regulatory arrangement. This list does not target any individual sectors. It does not target any individual company, organization. It does not target any person. And for the next step for China-U.S. consultations, I have clearly explained China's position just now. Our position has been clear and consistent. If the U.S. wants to keep the consultation, they need to show the sincerity and goodwill and rectify the wrong practices. We have principles for cooperation, and we have bottom lines for negotiation. And China will never compromise on major issues of principle. From Japan, the report released today has been similar to what is mentioned in the white paper released last September. So why China wants to re-emphasize the previously mentioned points? I have already introduced that for the latest report, it uses facts and data to review the essence and the reason for China-U.S. trade and trade deficit. And it also explains that the U.S. has gained a lot from this bilateral trade. I think the report will help all of you to understand the real situation of China-U.S. trade cooperation.
你好，法新社的记者提问。那么有一些企业已经宣布跟华为
From
停止供应关系，中方会不会
French
把这些企业
media
列入这个
and some enterprises have
还有
released that they will end the supply with Huawei. Will China include these enterprises into the unreliable entities list? And for G20, will MOFCOM send delegates to participate? For your question, I have already answered. For the first question, the Chinese government is undergoing certain procedures. For specific arrangements, we will release shortly. And for G20, I have already mentioned that if the U.S. wants to negotiate, it needs to show the goodwill and sincerity. It needs to rectify the wrong practices. We have bottom lines and principles. China will never compromise on major principles.
就是还是回到 G20这个问题，就是您刚刚说
Also on G20,
想要继续谈
you have
需要就是
mentioned that the U.S., if it wants to continue the consultation,
纠正错误，那就是说
it needs to show the
中
sincerity.
方而言，这个如果到 G20的时候，
And
这
on the
个
part of
就是在
China,
中方看来这些所谓的
if
错
until
误没有改的
G20,
话，中方会不会愿意
China
比
still
如说
does not see
见
no
那个
sign
特朗
of
普
improvement,
跟他谈？
will China be
还是
willing
会
to
拒绝？
meet with President Trump and discuss,
谢谢你的提
or
问。
will China refuse?
中方对于谈判的态度，刚才
Thank
我已经
you.
说过，
China's attitude and position for consultation
如果美方想要继续谈，
is very clear.
就必须拿出成
If the U.S. wants to continue the consultation, it needs to show the sincerity and need to rectify the wrong practices. We have the bottom lines and principles, and China will never give ground on major issues of principle.
关于 G20 贸易部长会议的有关情况，目前
And for the trade ministers meeting of G20,
大家还有没有问题？
currently we do not
如果没有
have
问题，今天的发布会
details.
到此结束。谢谢大
If
家。
with no further question, this is the end of today's press conference. Thank you.